The storm began long before the clouds appeared. In the middle of a crowded city street, where people rushed with umbrellas and aimless purpose, a man in an expensive suit stood completely still, staring at the reflection of himself in a rain-soaked shop window. His eyes were tired, his face unshaven, and behind that carefully pressed fabric and polished shoes was a truth he had run from for years. A truth that money could never protect him from. His name was Ayaan Malik, a self-made millionaire who once believed he had everything. But on that cold evening, as the drizzle turned into a steady rain, he realized something devastating. For all he had built, he had nothing that truly mattered. If you believe kindness and second chances still exist in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Ayaan had risen from nothing. Orphaned at 16, surviving through menial jobs, then hustling through night classes, and finally building a tech company from scratch. People admired him, envied him, even worshipped the ground he walked on. But success came with a price, one he didn't notice until it was too late. In the pursuit of wealth, he had cut himself off from softness, from warmth, from the human touch he once longed for. His days were filled with meetings, numbers, transactions, and the endless chase for more. And yet he felt hollow. That emptiness grew heavier with every passing year, until the day the call came, the kind of call that breaks a man open. His childhood caretaker, the only person who had ever shown him unconditional love, was ill. Very ill. She lived in a small, forgotten part of the city, far from the tower of glass Ayaan called an office. He hadn't visited her in months. He had no excuse. Money makes men selfish without them realizing it. Regret makes them human again. The next morning, Ayaan drove through narrow, muddy roads until he reached a tiny house with peeling paint and a sagging roof. Inside, on a thin mattress, lay the woman who had once stayed awake hungry so he could eat. Her frail form seemed too light for the world. When she opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled with a warmth he didn't deserve. That smile alone cracked open something inside him. She told him she was fine, that he shouldn't worry, that she was happy to see him. She asked about his work, his life, his success, all the things she was proud of but knew so little about. Ayaan told her everything except the truth, that he wasn't happy, that he was lonelier than ever, and that he wished he could go back in time to the days when life was simple and love was enough. When he left her home that day, a strange ache filled his chest. For the first time in years, he drove without music, without calls, without distraction. He drove with memories. Memories of her holding his hand when he cried, of her stitching his torn school uniform, of her telling him that kindness was a currency more valuable than money. He remembered how he once promised he would always be there for her, yet somewhere along the road of power and success, he lost sight of that promise. He returned to her house the next day, and the day after that. Soon it became his routine. He brought groceries, cooked meals, and cleaned the house. He replaced the old brittle windows, repaired the roof, and installed a small heating system. He brought medicines and sat with her for hours, telling her about things he never shared with anyone, not even his closest colleagues. But the more time he spent with her, the more he realized how bitterly he had failed at being human. He felt ashamed that it took her nearing the end of her life for him to finally come back. Weeks passed. Her health declined. Ayaan spent more time with her than at work, ignoring meetings and delaying deals worth millions. His business partners didn't understand. Some threatened to pull out. Others called him unstable. But Ayaan didn't care. For the first time, he knew exactly what mattered. One evening, as he sat beside her bed, she looked at him with a tenderness that made his throat tighten. She told him not to blame himself, that she had always known he carried a good heart, that she saw it in him even when he didn't. She asked him to promise her something. Not to change his life for her, but to change his life for himself. She wanted him to love again, to trust again, to believe that he was worthy of being more than a businessman. He promised. He meant it. She passed away quietly a few days later. Ayaan buried her next to the old banyan tree she loved, in the small village cemetery where she had once taken him to feed birds when he was young. As he stood there, watching the earth cover the last piece of his past, something inside him shattered, and something else awakened. He didn't return to his old life. Instead, he took a long break and traveled away from the city, choosing a remote town surrounded by mountains. He stayed in a small cottage, far from noise and ambition. Here, he met people who had little, but lived with full hearts. People who offered tea to strangers and smiles without reason. He saw children playing barefoot on dusty roads, laughing as if the world belonged to them. He saw elderly couples sitting outside their homes, sharing stories with neighbors. He saw a life he never knew existed. A life without pressure, without performance, without expectations. And then he met her, a woman named Zara who worked at a small community school. She wasn't glamorous, wealthy, or particularly extraordinary at first glance. But she had something Ayaan had not seen in years: sincerity. She spoke to him without fear of who he was, without admiration for his wealth, without interest in his status. She simply saw a man sitting alone on a bench watching the sunset and asked if he was okay. Their connection began quietly. She would often see him sitting by the river or walking along the hillside. Over time, she learned bits and pieces of his story, though he left out his success and wealth. He didn't want her to know that part of him yet. For the first time, he wanted someone to see his heart before his fortune. He helped her repair the school playground, painted walls with her, carried boxes of supplies, and listened to her talk about the children she taught. She spoke with passion, compassion, and dreams that reminded him of the caretaker who raised him. Ayaan found himself smiling again. Not the practiced smile he wore in boardrooms, but the kind that formed on its own. Months passed. Zara became the first person he confided in about his past, his regrets, and the woman who had raised him. She listened, touched by his vulnerability. She told him that people don't lose their way because they are bad, they lose their way because they are hurting. And sometimes it takes losing everything to find the things that truly matter. Her words stayed with him. Slowly, he discovered that love wasn't loud, it was gentle. It wasn't in grand gestures, but in small, steady warmth. It wasn't in being admired, it was in being understood. One day, after months of knowing him, Zara discovered who he really was: his real name, his company, his wealth, everything. But instead of stepping away, she said something that made his eyes sting. That none of it mattered if he didn't carry kindness in his heart. That the man she saw repairing broken swings and laughing with children was far more valuable than the man on magazine covers. That hearts, not fortunes, are what define people. And for the first time in his life, Ayaan believed it. If this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps more emotional stories reach those who need them. Years later, people would say Ayaan changed, that he became softer, kinder, more human. But the truth was simpler. He didn't change, he returned to who he always was long before the world demanded he become something else. He built a community center in Zara's town, named after the woman who raised him. It provided free education, medical support, and meals. Children ran through its corridors with joy, and elderly villagers found comfort in its warm rooms. Ayaan visited often, helping with repairs, teaching classes, serving food, doing all the things money couldn't buy. And in those moments, he realized the greatest wealth he possessed was not in his bank account, but in the lives he touched. Just before we end, please comment below: a kind heart is the real fortune. On quiet evenings, Ayaan often stood outside the community center, listening to the laughter echoing through the walls. He thought about his journey, the loneliness, the loss, the rediscovery, and the love he found along the way. And every single time, he whispered to himself the truth he had learned the hard way: his fortune never mattered. His heart did.